My sister Vivian thought she was clever draining my savings account for her dream wedding while I was overseas. What she did not know was that I am Reagan Matthews, a federal bank inspector who specializes in financial fraud investigations. As I stared at my empty account balance on my phone screen in Prague, watching $23,000 vanish into wedding vendors and luxury purchases, I realized my own blood had just committed multiple federal crimes. The family that raised me to value trust above everything had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. But here is where this story gets interesting. Before we dive into how my sister's greed unraveled our entire family's dark financial secrets, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. Smash that like button if you have ever dealt with family betrayal, and hit subscribe, because this revenge story has more twists than a roller coaster. Trust me, you will want to see how karma delivers justice when someone messes with the wrong federal inspector. 3 months earlier, I had been selected for a special assignment with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, investigating a sophisticated money laundering operation spanning multiple states. The assignment required me to work undercover in Eastern Europe, tracking digital currency flows that connected back to American financial institutions. My family knew I worked for the government, but they assumed it was some boring desk job processing paperwork. They had no idea I carried federal credentials and had the authority to freeze assets, initiate criminal investigations, and coordinate with the FBI on financial crimes. Before leaving for Prague, I had carefully organized my finances. The $23,000 in my savings account represented years of careful budgeting, overtime pay, and government bonuses. This money was earmarked for a down payment on my first house, something I had been planning since graduating from Georgetown with my degree in financial economics. I trusted my family completely, which was my first mistake. Vivian had always been the golden child in our household. At 26, she was 2 years younger than me, but she commanded attention wherever she went. Our parents, Martha and David, had always favored her dramatic flair and social butterfly personality over my quiet, methodical approach to life. When Vivian announced her engagement to Bradley, a wannabe influencer with 12,000 followers and no steady income, our parents were thrilled. They immediately began planning what they called the wedding of the century. The first red flag should have been when Vivian insisted on being added to my bank account for emergencies. She claimed she needed access in case something happened to me overseas, playing up fears about international travel and political instability. She produced tears on demand, explaining how worried she was about me being alone in a foreign country. Our parents supported her request, suggesting it was the responsible thing to do for family safety. Against my better judgment, I added her as a secondary account holder. The bank required my physical signature, and I specifically instructed them that any transactions over $500 needed my written approval. I documented this conversation carefully, taking notes and requesting email confirmation of the restrictions. As a federal inspector, I understood the importance of creating paper trails. 2 weeks into my Prague assignment, I received the first unauthorized transaction alert. Vivian had withdrawn $800, claiming it was for emergency medical expenses. When I called to confront her, she sobbed about a dental emergency and promised to pay me back immediately. She sent me a photo of herself with a swollen face, looking genuinely distressed. I felt guilty for questioning her and authorized the withdrawal retroactively. The second transaction was $1,500, allegedly for car repairs after an accident. Again, she provided documentation and photos of a damaged bumper. The third transaction was $2,000 for emergency legal fees related to the car accident. Each time, Vivian had compelling explanations, supporting documentation and emotional appeals that made me feel like a heartless sister for questioning her. By the time I realized the pattern, it was too late. Vivian had systematically drained my account through a series of smaller transactions that flew under the bank's radar. She had used her access to change my contact information, routing all transaction alerts to her email address instead of mine. She had also convinced the bank representatives that I was difficult to reach due to my overseas assignment and that she was handling my financial affairs. The final transaction was the largest $12,000 transferred directly to Enchanted Events Wedding Planning. This transaction finally triggered the bank's internal fraud prevention system, but by then my account was nearly empty. When I called the bank from Prague, they informed me that all transactions had been authorized by the secondary account holder using proper identification and security codes. The wedding planning company confirmed they had received payment for premium services, including a destination venue premium catering, professional photography, and luxury transportation. The contract was signed in Vivian's name, but funded entirely from my account. When I demanded they reverse the charges, they explained that their cancellation policy required 60 days' notice and the wedding was scheduled for the following month. I spent the next 48 hours documenting everything. Using my federal training, I traced every transaction, compiled all communications, and built a comprehensive timeline of Vivian's deception. The evidence was overwhelming: systematic fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud across state lines. These were not crimes of passion or desperation. They represented calculated financial abuse designed to steal my life savings for her personal benefit. What made the betrayal even more painful was discovering the family group chat messages I had missed. Vivian had been joking with our parents about borrowing Reagan's money for the wedding, treating my life savings like a personal ATM. Our mother had actually encouraged her, suggesting that sisters should support each other, and that I made plenty of money working for the government. The messages revealed that this was not an impulsive decision. Vivian had been planning to drain my account for months, timing her requests to coincide with my overseas assignment when I would be difficult to reach and emotionally vulnerable. She had researched my work schedule, coordinated with our parents to apply emotional pressure, and even practiced her sob stories to perfect her manipulation techniques. As I sat in my Prague hotel room, staring at the evidence of my family's betrayal, I realized that this was bigger than wedding theft. This was organized financial abuse, and as a federal bank inspector, I had both the authority and responsibility to investigate. My sister had unknowingly declared war on someone with the power to destroy her life, and she had left a digital trail that would make prosecution effortless. The family that raised me to believe blood was thicker than water had just learned they were dealing with someone whose job was catching financial criminals. They were about to discover that when you steal from a federal inspector, justice does not just come knocking. It kicks down the door with federal warrants and criminal charges. The morning after discovering my empty account, I did what any federal inspector would do. I opened an official investigation. Working from my hotel room in Prague, I accessed the Treasury Department's secure database and initiated a financial crimes inquiry under case number FC 2024-0847. The beauty of being a federal bank inspector is that I had legal authority to investigate financial fraud, even when I was the victim. My first step was requesting complete banking records for the past 6 months. Within hours, I had access to detailed transaction histories, IP address logs, and security footage from every ATM and bank location where Vivian had accessed my account. The federal system provided tools that civilian fraud victims could never access, including real-time monitoring of associated accounts and automatic flagging of suspicious activities. The investigation revealed a pattern of deception that went far beyond simple theft. Vivian had been using my account information to establish credit in her name, applying for store credit cards using my address and employment information. She had also been selling items purchased with my money, creating a secondary income stream that she failed to report on her tax returns. This was not just wedding theft. This was systematic identity fraud and tax evasion. But the most shocking discovery came when I cross-referenced Vivian's financial activities with our parents' accounts. The federal database showed a complex web of money transfers between multiple family members, suggesting coordinated financial fraud spanning several years. Our parents had been receiving regular deposits from Vivian's account money that ultimately traced back to my savings. They were not just enabling her theft, they were actively profiting from it. I spent the next 3 days building an airtight case. Using federal resources, I documented every transaction, identified every fraudulent activity, and traced the money trail through multiple accounts and institutions. The evidence was overwhelming: wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. These were federal offenses carrying potential prison sentences of up to 20 years. The most damning evidence came from intercepted communications. As a federal inspector investigating financial crimes, I had authority to monitor electronic communications related to the case. The family group chat messages revealed explicit discussions about stealing my money, with our parents providing guidance on timing and methodology. They had researched my work schedule, discussed ways to manipulate me emotionally, and even celebrated their successful theft. Our mother had written, "Reagan will never notice if we take it slowly. She is always working and never checks her account." Net. Our father had contributed, "We deserve this money more than she does. All she does is work for the government and save money, like a miser." Vivian had responded with laughing emojis and promises to share the wealth after her dream wedding. These messages constituted evidence of criminal conspiracy. The family had planned and executed a coordinated scheme to defraud a federal employee, creating liability under multiple federal statutes. They had no idea that their victim had the authority to investigate financial crimes and the resources of the United States Treasury Department behind her. I coordinated with my supervisor in Washington, briefing him on the situation and requesting permission to continue the investigation while maintaining my overseas assignment. He was fascinated by the case, noting that family financial fraud cases rarely involved federal employees as victims. He approved expanded investigative authority and assigned additional resources to support my work. The next phase involved setting traps. I established monitoring on all family members' financial accounts, tracking every transaction and identifying additional fraudulent activities. I also created fake emergency situations to test their willingness to provide financial support, calling from Prague with fabricated stories about needing money for medical expenses or emergency travel changes. Their responses were revealing. When I claimed to need emergency medical treatment, Vivian suggested I use my emergency fund that she had already stolen. When I mentioned being robbed and needing money for replacement documents, our parents suggested I contact my bank for assistance, knowing perfectly well that my account was empty. They showed no guilt, no concern for my well-being, and no intention of returning the stolen money. Meanwhile, I began documenting the scope of their financial crimes. Vivian's credit card applications using my information had been approved, creating thousands of dollars in additional debt that would eventually damage my credit score. She had also used my employment information to secure a personal loan, forging my signature on documents that made me legally liable for her debt. Our parents had been complicit in additional schemes. They had claimed me as a dependent on their tax returns, despite my independent status, illegally reducing their tax liability. They had also been receiving regular gifts from Vivian that exceeded federal reporting requirements, creating additional tax violations. The wedding itself represented the culmination of their criminal enterprise. Every vendor payment, every luxury upgrade, every premium service had been funded with stolen money. The venue catering, photography, music, flowers, and transportation all represented proceeds from federal crimes. Under asset forfeiture laws, everything could be seized as evidence. I realized that my family had unknowingly created the perfect storm for federal prosecution. They had committed crimes across state lines, involved federal employees, and left extensive digital evidence. Their communications demonstrated intent, their financial records proved execution, and their continued denial showed a lack of remorse that prosecutors love to see. But I wanted more than criminal prosecution. I wanted complete justice, and that meant exposing their crimes in the most devastating way possible. The wedding they had stolen my money to fund would become the stage for their public humiliation and arrest. They had chosen to celebrate their criminal success in front of 200 guests. I would ensure those same guests witnessed their downfall. I began coordinating with federal agents in the United States, planning a carefully orchestrated intervention that would maximize both legal consequences and personal humiliation. The family that had betrayed my trust would learn that when you steal from a federal inspector, justice comes in the form of federal agents with handcuffs and criminal warrants. Their wedding day was going to be unforgettable, but not in the way they had planned. Returning to the United States 2 weeks before Vivian's wedding, I maintained complete radio silence with my family. They assumed I was still overseas, working on my mysterious government assignment. In reality, I was coordinating with federal agents, prosecutors, and financial crimes investigators to build the most comprehensive case of family fraud in recent memory. My first stop was the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Washington, D.C. Agent Sarah Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran specializing in white-collar crime, reviewed my evidence with growing amazement. She had never seen a case where the victim was also the lead investigator, and she was impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation. Within hours, she had assigned a full task force to the case. "Reagan, this is extraordinary work," Agent Rodriguez explained during our initial meeting. "Your family has committed enough federal crimes to justify a RICO investigation. The coordination between multiple family members, the crossing of state lines, and the involvement of a federal employee as the victim gives us jurisdiction under multiple statutes." The task force included specialists in financial crimes, tax fraud, identity theft, and organized criminal conspiracy. They confirmed that my family's activities met the criteria for federal racketeering charges, which carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in prison. The evidence I had gathered was so comprehensive that prosecution would be straightforward. But I wanted to ensure maximum impact. Working with the legal team, we identified the optimal timing for arrests and asset seizure. The wedding represented the perfect opportunity because all the principal conspirators would be gathered in one location, celebrating their criminal success with stolen money. The symbolism was perfect. They would be arrested while enjoying the fruits of their crimes. The financial investigation revealed even more extensive fraud than I had initially discovered. Vivian had been operating what essentially amounted to a criminal enterprise, using my identity to establish credit-secure loans and make purchases that she then resold for profit. Our parents had been laundering money through fake business expenses and unreported income transfers. The total value of their criminal activities exceeded $100,000. Asset forfeiture proceedings began immediately. Federal agents obtained warrants to seize all proceeds from the fraudulent activities, including wedding deposits, purchased items, and money held in family accounts. The luxury wedding venue premium catering services, professional photography packages, and destination honeymoon reservations were all subject to immediate seizure as proceeds from criminal activity. Meanwhile, I worked to protect innocent parties who might be affected by the investigation. Vivian's fiancé Bradley appeared to be unaware of the criminal funding for their wedding. His social media posts and private communications showed genuine excitement about their relationship and confusion about how they could afford such an expensive celebration. I recommended that prosecutors offer him immunity in exchange for cooperation. The wedding vendors were also innocent victims. The venue caterers, photographers, and other service providers had been paid with stolen money, but they had provided services in good faith. Federal agents coordinated with them to minimize disruption while preserving evidence. Most vendors were cooperative once they understood the criminal nature of the payments. During this preparation phase, my family continued their deception. They sent me regular updates about wedding preparations, expressing fake concern about my overseas assignment and hoping I would return in time for the celebration. Their messages were filled with excitement about the perfect wedding they were planning, completely unaware that every detail had been documented as evidence of criminal activity. Vivian sent me photos of her dress, the venue decorations, and menu selections, bragging about the amazing deals she had negotiated with vendors. Our parents shared updates about guest arrangements, travel plans, and their pride in hosting such an elegant celebration. None of them mentioned the source of funding or expressed any guilt about stealing my life savings. The most infuriating messages came from our mother, who wrote long emotional appeals about family unity and the importance of being present for major life events. She explained how much it would mean to Vivian if I could attend the wedding, describing it as a once-in-a-lifetime celebration that would bring our family closer together. The irony was overwhelming. They wanted me to witness their celebration of stealing my money. I maintained my cover perfectly, responding with appropriate enthusiasm and promising to make every effort to attend. I even offered to help with last-minute arrangements, volunteering to handle vendor payments or coordinate with service providers. They declined my offers, claiming everything was already organized, not realizing they were refusing help from someone who could have resolved their upcoming legal problems. Agent Rodriguez and her team worked around the clock to coordinate the arrest operation. Federal marshals would be positioned throughout the venue, ready to execute warrants at the optimal moment. The plan called for arrests during the reception after the ceremony, but before the couple could leave for their honeymoon. This timing would maximize the number of witnesses while minimizing disruption to guests who were innocent of any wrongdoing. The charges were extensive wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. Each family member faced different combinations of charges based on their level of involvement. Vivian faced the most serious charges due to her role as the primary perpetrator. Our parents faced conspiracy and money laundering charges for their supporting role in the criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors were confident in securing convictions. The evidence was overwhelming, the crimes were clearly documented, and the defendants had left extensive digital trails. The case represented what prosecutors call a slam dunk. Criminal activity so well documented that defense attorneys would likely recommend plea agreements rather than risk trial. But the most satisfying aspect of the investigation was the financial recovery. Asset forfeiture laws allowed federal agents to seize all proceeds from criminal activity, including wedding expenses, luxury purchases, and money held in family accounts. Every dollar they had stolen would be recovered, along with additional penalties and interest. The wedding they had planned as their celebration of successful theft would instead become the stage for their public humiliation and arrest. 200 guests who had been invited to witness their happiness would instead watch federal agents place them in handcuffs and read their rights. As the wedding date approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and sadness. These were people I had loved and trusted, family members who had shaped my childhood and supported my education. But they had chosen to betray that trust in the most calculated way possible, stealing my life savings to fund their celebration while lying to my face about their criminal activities. Justice was coming, and it would be swift, comprehensive, and absolutely devastating. They had unknowingly declared war on someone with the full power of the federal government behind her, and they were about to learn that when you steal from a federal inspector, the consequences extend far beyond simple restitution. The family that raised me to value loyalty above everything was about to discover what real consequences looked like when that loyalty was betrayed. Would you believe what happened next? Because this story is about to take a turn that nobody saw coming, not even me. Make sure you are subscribed, because the next part reveals how everything unraveled in the most spectacular way possible. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happened when 200 wedding guests got front row seats to federal justice. The wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and clear blue skies that made the venue look like something from a fairy tale. The Riverside Manor was everything Vivian had dreamed of: sprawling gardens, elegant ballrooms, and luxury accommodations that cost more than most people earned in a year. What she did not know was that federal agents were already positioned throughout the property, disguised as catering staff, photographers, and event coordinators. I arrived at the venue wearing my best dress and carrying a small purse that contained my federal credentials, a recording device, and direct communication with Agent Rodriguez. To my family, I looked like the loving sister who had rushed back from overseas to celebrate this special day. In reality, I was the lead federal inspector overseeing the largest family fraud bust in recent Treasury Department history. The ceremony was beautiful in the most tragic way possible. Vivian looked radiant in her designer gown, walking down an aisle decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers that had been purchased with my stolen money. Bradley waited at the altar with genuine tears in his eyes, completely unaware that his wedding was funded by federal crimes. Our parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride at the elegant celebration they had helped orchestrate through systematic theft. During the vows, I listened to Vivian promise to love, honor, and cherish Bradley through good times and bad, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. The irony was overwhelming. She was promising financial partnership while standing at an altar paid for with stolen money, wearing a dress purchased through identity fraud, celebrating a relationship built on criminal proceeds. The reception began with cocktails on the garden terrace. Guests mingled among elegant flower arrangements, sampling premium appetizers and champagne that represented the most expensive items my stolen money could buy. Family friends congratulated our parents on hosting such a magnificent celebration, praising their generosity and asking how they had managed such luxury on their modest retirement income. Our father basked in the attention, explaining that they had saved for years to give Vivian her dream wedding. Our mother added emotional flourishes about the importance of family and the joy of seeing their daughter so happy. They accepted praise for their sacrifice and generosity, while knowing every word was a lie, built on stolen money and criminal conspiracy. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, documenting everything with my hidden recording device and maintaining communication with the federal agents positioned throughout the venue. Guests shared stories about Vivian's childhood, our family traditions, and their hopes for the newlyweds' future. None of them suspected they were attending a celebration funded by federal crimes or that arrests were imminent. The moment of truth came during the dinner service. As guests enjoyed their premium meal, filet mignon and lobster paid for with my life savings, Agent Rodriguez gave me the signal. Federal marshals began moving into position around the ballroom, coordinating with local law enforcement to secure all exits and ensure guest safety during the arrest operation. I approached the head table where my family sat, basking in their stolen glory. Vivian was radiant with happiness, holding Bradley's hand and accepting congratulations from endless streams of well-wishers. Our parents flanked them like proud royalty, completely absorbed in the success of their criminal enterprise. "Vivian," I said, approaching her chair with a warm smile, "could I speak with you privately for just a moment? I have something special I wanted to give you." She followed me to a quiet corner of the ballroom, assuming I had brought her a wedding gift or wanted to share a sentimental sister moment. Bradley watched us go with an indulgent smile, probably thinking we were having some touching family interaction that would make beautiful memories. "I do have something special for you," I said, pulling out my federal credentials and displaying them clearly. "Vivian Matthews, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes." The color drained from her face as she stared at the badge and identification that revealed my true profession. For the first time in months, Vivian was speechless, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound as she processed the magnitude of her mistake. "You are a bank inspector," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the reception music. "Federal bank inspector," I corrected. "And you just committed multiple federal crimes against a Treasury Department employee. You have the right to remain silent." Agent Rodriguez appeared beside us, along with two federal marshals who began the formal arrest process. Vivian's legs gave out as the handcuffs clicked into place, and she had to be supported by the agents as they read her Miranda rights. The designer wedding dress that had been purchased with stolen money became her outfit for federal arrest. The ballroom erupted into chaos as additional agents moved in to arrest our parents. Our father tried to run, but was tackled by marshals near the dessert table, scattering wedding cake and champagne glasses across the marble floor. Our mother fainted completely, requiring medical attention before she could be processed and transported. Bradley stood frozen at the head table watching his new wife being arrested by federal agents, while 200 wedding guests screamed and scrambled for exits. The elegant reception dissolved into pandemonium as law enforcement secured the scene and began interviewing witnesses. The venue manager tried to restore order, but there was no containing the spectacle of a federal bust unfolding during a wedding reception. Guests pulled out phones to record the arrests, creating viral social media content that would haunt my family forever. The hashtag #FederalWeddingBust began trending within hours. Federal agents simultaneously executed search warrants on family properties and vehicles, seizing evidence and freezing all accounts connected to the criminal conspiracy. The honeymoon reservations were canceled. The wedding gifts were cataloged as potential evidence, and the entire celebration became a crime scene. As my family was loaded into federal transport vehicles, still wearing their wedding attire and handcuffs, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. These were people I had loved and trusted, but they had chosen to betray that trust in the most calculated way possible. They had stolen my life savings, committed federal crimes, and celebrated their criminal success without showing any remorse or guilt. The wedding they had planned as their triumph had become their downfall. The elegant venue became the backdrop for their arrest. The luxury celebration became evidence of their crimes, and the 200 guests became witnesses to federal justice. Agent Rodriguez approached me as the last transport vehicle disappeared into the distance. "Reagan, this was textbook perfect. Clean arrests, comprehensive evidence, and minimal civilian disruption. Your family picked the wrong person to steal from." And looking around the destroyed reception hall, overturned tables, scattered flowers, abandoned champagne glasses, and yellow police tape, I realized that justice had been served in the most poetic way possible. They had used my money to create their perfect day, and I had used my federal authority to make it their worst nightmare. The aftermath of the wedding arrests unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated federal investigation, because that is exactly what it was. Within 24 hours, the story had exploded across social media, local news, and even national outlets, fascinated by the unprecedented nature of a family fraud bust at a wedding reception. The headlines were brutal and unrelenting. Federal inspector's family arrested at wedding funded by stolen money. Sister steals life savings for dream wedding, gets federal nightmare instead. And Treasury employee's family learns hard lesson about financial crimes. The viral videos from wedding guests showed my family being arrested in their formal attire, creating images that would follow them forever. Bradley's world collapsed completely within hours of returning from what should have been his wedding night. Instead of a luxury honeymoon suite, he found himself in a federal courthouse, learning that his new wife faced up to 20 years in prison for financial crimes. The marriage certificate was barely dry when federal prosecutors offered him immunity in exchange for full cooperation against his bride. He provided devastating testimony about Vivian's spending habits, her mysterious ability to afford luxury items despite having no steady income, and her casual references to borrowing money from family members. He also revealed private conversations where she had bragged about manipulating me emotionally and planning to milk my government salary for years to come. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. Federal forensic accountants traced every stolen dollar through multiple accounts, credit cards, and purchase transactions. The final tally exceeded $97,000 in direct theft, plus additional amounts in fraudulent credit applications, tax evasion and money laundering activities. Asset forfeiture proceedings moved with devastating efficiency. Federal agents seized the wedding venue deposits, vendor payments, and luxury items purchased with stolen money. Vivian's engagement ring, wedding dress, and honeymoon reservations were all confiscated as proceeds from criminal activity. Even the wedding gifts were held as potential evidence until their source could be verified. Our parents' retirement savings were frozen pending investigation into their role in the money laundering conspiracy. Their modest suburban home was placed under federal lien as potential collateral for restitution payments. The comfortable retirement they had planned was replaced by legal bills, criminal defense costs, and the possibility of federal prison sentences. The extended family and social consequences were equally devastating. Wedding guests shared their experiences on social media, creating viral content that portrayed my family as sophisticated criminals who had deceived everyone around them. Longtime family friends expressed shock and betrayal, many revealing they had loaned money or provided financial assistance that they now realized had been unnecessary. Vivian's former employer terminated her immediately after learning about the federal charges. Her social media influencer aspirations died overnight as sponsors distanced themselves from the scandal. Bradley's family threatened to have the marriage annulled, claiming fraud in the inducement since the entire relationship had been built on criminal proceeds. The wedding vendor community rallied around the federal investigation, providing additional evidence of suspicious payment methods and unusual requests that now made sense in the context of criminal activity. The venue manager revealed that Vivian had been evasive about payment sources and had insisted on cash transactions that avoided normal business documentation. Local media coverage expanded into investigative pieces about family financial abuse, federal employee protections, and the growing problem of identity theft between relatives. I was interviewed as both victim and investigator, providing expert commentary on financial crimes while sharing my personal experience of family betrayal. The interviews were cathartic but painful, describing how people I loved and trusted had systematically stolen my life savings required me to confront the depth of their deception. They had not made desperate decisions in crisis moments. They had planned and executed a sophisticated criminal conspiracy over several months. Federal prosecutors moved aggressively toward plea negotiations. The evidence was overwhelming. The crimes were clearly documented, and the defendants had no realistic defense strategy. Defense attorneys recommended cooperation and guilty pleas to avoid trial and minimize prison sentences. Vivian's attorney approached me directly about restitution negotiations. She was willing to plead guilty to all federal charges in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation. The proposed agreement included full financial restitution forfeiture of all assets purchased with stolen money and cooperation in prosecuting our parents' related charges. Our parents hired separate attorneys who immediately began distancing them from Vivian's activities. They claimed ignorance about the source of money used for wedding expenses and denied knowledge of any criminal conspiracy. However, the intercepted communications contradicted these claims, showing clear evidence of planning and coordination. The tax implications added another layer of consequences. The Internal Revenue Service opened parallel investigations into unreported income fraudulent deductions and failure to report financial gifts. The criminal charges would be followed by civil tax penalties, interest payments, and potential additional prosecution for tax fraud. My professional reputation within the Treasury Department was enhanced rather than damaged by the investigation. Supervisors praised my thoroughness, professionalism, and ability to maintain objectivity while investigating crimes that personally affected me. The case became a training example for other financial investigators. But the personal cost was enormous. I had lost my entire family in one devastating revelation. People I had loved and trusted since childhood had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. The family gatherings, holiday traditions, and shared memories were all tainted by the knowledge that they had been planning to steal from me. The money was ultimately recovered through asset forfeiture and restitution agreements, but the emotional damage was permanent. I learned that blood relationships provide no protection against financial predators, and that family members can be the most dangerous criminals because they have complete access and unquestioned trust. Friends and colleagues offered support, but many struggled to understand how family members could commit such calculated crimes against each other. The explanation was simple greed, and entitlement had overcome love and loyalty. They had convinced themselves they deserved my money more than I did. As plea agreements were finalized and prison sentences were determined, I realized that justice had been served, but at an enormous personal cost. My family's criminal enterprise had been completely dismantled, but I had lost relationships that could never be repaired. They had chosen money over family, and the consequences would follow them forever. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate new beginnings had instead marked the end of everything they had built through lies and theft. 6 months after the wedding arrests, the final chapter of my family's criminal enterprise was written in a federal courthouse where justice was served with clinical precision. Vivian pleaded guilty to 12 federal charges and received a sentence of 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Our parents received 4-year sentences for their roles in the money laundering conspiracy, with early release possible after serving 18 months. The restitution was complete and comprehensive. Every stolen dollar was recovered with interest penalties and additional damages that reflected the full scope of their criminal activities. The federal government's asset forfeiture powers ensured that not only was my money returned, but additional compensation was provided for the emotional distress and professional complications their crimes had created. Bradley had the marriage annulled within 3 months, citing fraud in the inducement and criminal conspiracy as grounds for voiding the entire relationship. He testified against Vivian during sentencing, describing how her deception had destroyed his trust in relationships and created lasting trauma around financial security. He moved across the country and changed his name to escape association with the scandal. The professional vindication was extraordinary. The Treasury Department recognized my handling of the investigation as exemplary, demonstrating how federal employees should respond when they become victims of financial crimes. My thoroughness, objectivity, and adherence to proper procedures became training materials for other investigators facing similar situations. But beyond professional recognition, I discovered something unexpected about family and loyalty. Real family, I learned, is not determined by blood relationships or legal documents. Real family consists of people who support you, respect you, and would never deliberately harm you for personal gain. My biological family had failed that test spectacularly, but other people in my life had proven themselves worthy of genuine trust. My colleagues at the Treasury Department became my chosen family. Agent Rodriguez and her team had worked tirelessly to ensure justice was served, treating my case with the same dedication they would show any victim of financial crimes. They celebrated my vindication and supported me through the emotional challenges of prosecuting people I had once loved. My Georgetown University alumni network rallied around me when the story became public. Former classmates who worked in finance, law enforcement, and government reached out to offer support, job opportunities, and genuine friendship. They understood the complexity of family betrayal and provided emotional support without judgment or unwanted advice. The most meaningful relationships came from unexpected sources. Other victims of family financial abuse contacted me through social media, sharing their own stories of betrayal and seeking advice about recovery and prosecution. I realized that family financial abuse is far more common than most people recognize, hidden by shame and social expectations about blood loyalty. I began volunteering with organizations that help victims of financial elder abuse and family fraud, using my professional expertise to help people navigate complex investigations and recovery processes. These relationships provided purpose beyond my federal career and connected me with people who understood the unique trauma of family betrayal. The recovery process taught me valuable lessons about trust boundaries and self-protection. I learned to distinguish between healthy family relationships and toxic dynamics disguised as love. I developed better instincts for recognizing manipulation and emotional exploitation. Most importantly, I learned that protecting myself from predators, even family members, was not selfish but necessary. My new home purchase, delayed but not defeated by my family's theft, became a symbol of independence and recovery. The house I bought with recovered funds, plus federal compensation, was larger and more beautiful than anything I had originally planned. It represented not just financial security, but emotional freedom from people who had tried to control and exploit me. The media attention eventually subsided, but the lessons remained relevant for audiences dealing with similar challenges. I received speaking requests from law enforcement organizations, financial institutions, and victim advocacy groups. Sharing my experience helped other people recognize warning signs and understand their options for recovery and prosecution. Dating became complicated but ultimately more honest. Potential partners who were intimidated by my federal career or concerned about my family scandal were not worth my time anyway. The people who appreciated my strength, professional competence, and ability to seek justice were the ones capable of healthy relationships. Financial security took on new meaning after experiencing systematic theft by trusted family members. I implemented multiple layers of protection, including separate accounts, enhanced monitoring, and legal documents that prevent unauthorized access. But more importantly, I learned that money is just a tool for creating the life you want, not something worth sacrificing relationships over. The ongoing prison sentences served as constant reminders that actions have consequences even within families. Vivian's 8-year sentence meant missing births, deaths, celebrations, and milestones that could never be recovered. Our parents' imprisonment during their retirement years represented the loss of freedom and dignity they could never reclaim. But justice also meant moving forward without resentment or bitterness consuming my life. I chose to focus on building positive relationships, advancing my career, and creating meaning beyond the betrayal I had experienced. The people who had hurt me were facing consequences for their choices, but my happiness could not depend on their suffering. The Treasury Department promoted me to Senior Federal Bank Inspector, recognizing both my professional competence and my unique experience investigating family financial crimes. My new position involved training other investigators and developing protocols for cases involving federal employees as victims. As I reflect on this entire experience, I realize that losing my original family led to finding my real family among people who actually deserve trust and loyalty. Blood relationships that lack respect, honesty, and basic decency are worthless compared to chosen relationships built on mutual support and genuine care. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate new beginnings actually did mark a new chapter, just not the one my family had planned. Their criminal celebration became my liberation from toxic relationships disguised as love. They lost their freedom, dignity, and future prospects, while I gained clarity about what family really means. Now, I want to hear from you about family loyalty and consequences. Have you ever had to choose between family relationships and doing what was right? When someone betrays your trust for money, do you believe forgiveness is possible or necessary? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because these situations are more common than people realize, and your experiences might help someone else facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, family drama, and life lessons learned the hard way. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding how financial crimes actually work and why boundaries matter even within families. Thank you for watching my journey from victim to victor, and remember that sometimes the family that hurts you the most teaches you the most valuable lessons about who deserves your trust. Stay strong, protect yourselves, and never let anyone convince you that blood relations justify criminal behavior.